territory of the Haudenosaunee peoples. And they were originally promised this land as a part of the Haldimand Tract on either side of the Grand River. And so as we move to truth and reconciliation, we just want to honor the fact that we are on land that belonged to other people at one point in time. Okay. And so we promised introductions, so we'll do it again. My name is Alicia Flatt. I am a career advisor. I absolutely love career advising. I knew that I always wanted to work with university students. So whether that was with mental health support when I was working in residences, or financial support when I worked in financial aid, or encouraging students to be able to participate in university when I worked in admissions. I was in a different area, and I was able to take on a master's degree, and I'm just finishing up a career development practitioner certificate. And I realized that in every area I worked, what I missed was the transformational conversations that you can have through career advising. And so I feel like I found the right fit, because the conversations that I have with you, hearing about how talented and fantastic you are and working towards a vision for what your life could look like is just my favorite thing. So today's session is no different, and hopefully we'll be able to learn and grow with each other today as well. And then we also have Paulina. Paulina, take it away.
Thank you. Before we do, I am wondering if you want to tell us a little bit about your work from home environment today.
Oh, sure. So for those of you who've tuned in before, I seem to be always moving around. Today I am in my beautiful wood paneled basement, which I referenced yesterday. And so we talk about sometimes how later on in this workshop, we'll talk about how natural light is really important, and having an environment like that is really good. That's not my situation today. And so we're also mindful that that doesn't always work. But this is kind of my sanctuary, and you'll see my couch in the background. That's where I've been binge watching Lord of the Rings during the quarantine to keep me company. It's either Lord of the Rings or The Office, which is very different, but also complementary, I would say. So yeah, that's my little work from home sliver for you.
Is it only Lord of the Rings, or are you getting into the Hobbits as well?
Well, so far I'm on Return of the King. But I only have like 20 minutes an evening to watch. So it's a slow journey to Mordor.
That's cool. I like how you're doing that. It's like, yeah, like it's watching a series, because they're so long anyway. It's you have 9 hours worth of content. That's awesome.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Alicia. So my name is Paulina, and I am also so thankful to be here with you today, and very appreciative to be sharing this space. I am also a career advisor, and I also completely love what I do. Basically, I learned early, well, not early on, it actually took me a little bit to figure out that what I love most in a job is where I get to work with people, inspire people, coach people, educate people, primarily adults. So I have been quite thankful to be able to work in this environment. And before I was at the university, I was working with newcomers to Canada on employment counseling, and actually immigration counseling as well. That's a little bit of what I was doing, but I'm really happy to be here. I've been at the university for 2.5 years now. And I completed my master in education last year. Because I just knew that this is what I love to do, coaching people and yeah, helping them get through whatever they wanted to do next with their lives. Again, primarily adults. And in terms of my environment, I kind of shared this with you yesterday if you were here. I am in what used to be the dog's room. So his pillows and stuff are still here, and he still gets a little grumpy if he can't get in, if he really wants to be in. So hopefully he won't get grumpy with us today. But just a little bit about my environment. I actually don't have Netflix or anything like that, but I do have cable for the first time in like 6 years. So what I have been binging on is that I've been watching the local news every day. I don't miss a day of local news, and I kind of love it. And also, it's where I've been getting all my ideas for local market information. I am in the Kitchener-Waterloo area. I'm living in Waterloo right now. So it's just a great way of knowing who's hiring, what's happening, what companies are pivoting, and that's why I have all of these news ideas and thoughts in my head. And that's why I reference them a lot. If you've noticed, it's because it's what I watch.
Amazing.
So, anyway, that is a little bit about myself. And coming up next, we're starting with a Mentimeter, and we will have a few of these along the way. We're gonna ask you to please go to menti.com, either on your personal device or your cell phone, and go to 781987 for the key. And we want to know if you have attended other webinars in this series. So as you know, or as you may or may not know, Alicia and I, this is the third webinar we deliver this week. There have been 2 others previously. So that's good. We've been getting some people that have attended both, and then some people that have attended 1. So that's great. It's nice to see you back. Welcome. And oh, and some people joining us for the first time. Welcome to you as well. We still haven't gotten the bewildered, there are more than 1 responses, and those are okay too. It's just good for us to know where you're at, and you know, if you've heard of this series and that kind of stuff. But it is nice to see that we're getting almost an even split here of people who joined us for the first time and people who joined, who have joined us before. So welcome back to those who have joined us before. And I will keep going here because I have another question for you. But thank you for your information. So now my question for you is, do you have experience with virtual interviews? So again, you're going to go to the same place. It's still at menti.com. And the key is at the top of your screen there, 781987. Okay, so some of you do have experience with virtual interviews. Some of you, Skype is your middle name. You've been doing them. You know what they look like. Maybe you're here to hone a little bit of your skills. Some of you have had phone interviews before, which is great. There's a lot of transferable kind of experiences that go from phone to virtual interviews. A lot of the concerns are kind of the same, like how do you convey enthusiasm and how do you connect with the on the other line. But then you have a whole new line of concerns, right? What's in your background? What shirt are you wearing? Is it too busy? Whatever. Do you have natural light? All of these things. And for those of you who have not interviewed before, I'm hoping that this workshop will kind of hit all of the different kind of points of experience that we're seeing on this slide. So thank you for answering that. And we have 1 more for you. And I'm gonna ask you to please continue on that Menti. The code is at the top there, 781987. We're just hoping that you give us a little bit of a feel for what you're hoping to learn or discover today. How to make a good first impression. Good. How to make an impression. We certainly talk about that, so I'm glad. How to prepare for the virtual interview. How to connect with the interviewer in an online setting. Absolutely. Yeah, that's big. How to be more concise. Yeah, that's good. Prepare for potential questions. That's awesome. Strategies for personal video interviews. We will be discussing that. How to start the virtual interview. We'll also talk a little bit about that, right? There's sometimes just a little bit of that awkwardness that comes along with it, and people might want to do some small talk with you. And that's okay. It's just being prepared for it. And knowing that small talk, they're getting a first impression of you, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the start of the interview. And you don't have to answer necessarily in an interviewee way. How to prepare for potential questions. Wow, these are a lot of questions, a lot of answers here. How to do an effective job communicating personal touch. Ah, okay. And how to make sure technical difficulties don't hamper the train of thought or other things. How different from TC call room interview? Interesting, yes. Some TC Tatum Center veterans out there wondering how this might be different? Absolutely. Wow, these are tons of great questions. Alicia, any of them stand out to you as you kind of?
Oh, all of them are so good. And it's true, there'll be some things that might differ a little bit because you're at home, and then other things like making that first impression, well, a lot of it will be the same as if you were in person with somebody. And it feels weirder to smile at a computer. And so it's something even to practice. If you haven't had a Zoom call one-on-one with somebody else in a while, call up a friend or a family member and just see how things go, and find little tips and tricks that work for you there. Oh, being humble while still selling our skills. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. We can definitely talk about that today.
Yes, we'll be discussing that. And just so you know, this is actually something that I actively do since we're talking about smiling at a screen. You can see my little corner of a Post-it note that says smile. I leave right by my camera. Not to say that I don't naturally smile, especially in webinars, things like that. I just get excited. But say a longer Zoom call that might be maybe slightly less engaging, or, you know, it's a longer meeting, just checking in with yourself and remembering, oh, right, you probably want to smile, show engagement. Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's my tip to you that I actually do. So there we go. Thank you all for sharing. Sorry, I spent a little bit of time here, but I think it's important to kind of introduce the whole topic.
Yeah. So, and one thing we should really clarify, sorry, before we get into the agenda, is we are looking for attendance from you. So there is somebody who is here today who's marked as attendance. If you can send a private message to attendance with your full name, that would be a great way for us to be able to track who's been making use of these workshops and how valuable they might be to the student body. So thank you if you can send your name.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alicia. Yes, so look for attendance CCA. That is Cindy, who is helping us out with attendance. Thank you, Cindy. All right. So in terms of our agenda, we have a few things that we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about co-op supports and changes to spring 2020. Then we're going to get into the actual interview stuff. So we're going to talk about the prep for the actual interviews, then virtual interviews tips, and this is specifically tips related to webcams and things like that. Then we're going to get into answering interview questions, then very importantly, what to ask at the end of an interview, and then some Q&A. So if you've been here for the last two webinars, oh, I forgot that word, wow. Please, you will have seen this before. We just want to reiterate to you that if you have any questions at all about co-op, please reach out to your co-op advisor. You will see them on your Waterloo Works dashboard. As well, check out Waterloo Works Daily for updates and job posting notifications. With the Center for Career Action, we have a few things going on. We have workshops, which is where you are today, and you can see more events at on Waterloo Works, as well as appointments. You can book those directly through Waterloo Works. Drop-ins, you can also book through Waterloo Works, so that if you need to be seen directly that day, you can likely get in through a drop-in. We also have live chats, and those are covered by our lovely front desk staff, and they will be able to direct you in case you are having trouble booking an appointment, for example, or you can't see events. The live chat is the place to go. And lastly, Career Hub is like having a career advisor in your pocket at all times. It is open 24/7, but it's made up of all of the stuff that Alicia and myself and our colleagues have in our heads that we have written down and put on paper for you or on the web. So please check out Career Hub. It's a place to go when you're working on your resume at 3 a.m. and you just want to ask a question, or not ask a question, but look for more information. careerhub.uwaterloo.ca. Now, In terms of co-op and the changes to spring 2020, the best place to go is our spring 2020 co-op work term page on the co-op site. So just check it out. We have the link at the top left there. But that is the place to go to find out about the changes to requirements for spring 2020. And again, if you have any questions about those, please talk to your co-op advisor. So that being said, Alicia and I are going to switch off our cameras just so you can focus on the PowerPoints from now on. But we have appreciated, well, at least being able to show our faces and our work from home environments. And I will stop my camera and hand it over to Alicia for introducing the preparing for interviews.
Absolutely. So I know that this was a question that came up when we asked what you wanted to learn and discover today. So today we're going to dig right into it. How do you prepare for an interview? And we'll be able to give you some of those resources. So on the next slide, what we will be able to get a sense of is what steps you can take. And the first is just to get some of your talking points out. So, and part of that will be knowing yourself. So some of you will have already attended the personal branding workshop that we did on Monday or Tuesday, sorry, the first session. If you haven't attended the personal branding, it is offered again this coming Tuesday. So you will be able to check that out and then know what kinds of things that you want to talk about. This might mean brainstorming about 5 pride stories, I call them. 5 things that you did that you're like, wow, I'm actually really proud of how that turned out. If you can remember some of those stories in advance that you want the employers to know, you'll feel much more prepared when they ask you a question like, tell me about a time you showed your time management skills, for example, because you can relate your time management skills with something that you really want the employer to hear about. And then finally, knowing the employer. So we know that we want to review the job posting, but we also want to do a little bit more research so that we can get a sense of what is it that this company does? How are they growing? How are they making changes even in response to the coronavirus? Those are all kinds of things that can be really helpful in your research so that you can come prepared with really great questions to ask them as well, and also reflect your knowledge in your answers. And we will get to how do you ask questions to employers at the end of this webinar as well. And then we hear a lot of common concerns. So questions like, what are they going to ask me? Or what if I don't have an answer or I give the wrong answer? What if I don't understand a question? Or what if I'm so nervous, I blank out and I forget what to say? And for all of these questions, there's kind of similar solutions. The first is practice. So we will go over some of the questions employers often ask, but knowing the stories you want to tell and saying them out loud will be the best way to prepare for that upcoming interview. So we'll give you a model to follow for that, but also what I recommend you do is take a look at that job posting, and for all of the required skills that you see in a job posting, come up with 1 or 2 stories of how you demonstrated that skill. If you have a number of stories ready to be told, then even if they ask a question in a slightly different way than you were expecting, you likely will have stories that reflect what you want to hear. And so that's what we would recommend you do. And finally, you can book a mock interview or attend a drop-in center with a drop-in at the Center for Career Action. One of my favorite appointments to facilitate is the mock interview appointment. It's an hour where I get to pretend to be your employer and ask you questions, and you can either just ask me about what should you do in certain circumstances, or we can pretend it's an interview, and it's a really great way to prepare. So that's also open for you. We offer those virtually as well. And now we're moving into, okay, so those were interview tips I would give if they were in person or online, but now I'm going to look specifically at what kinds of tips I could share for virtual interviewing. So we talked, you wanted to know about first impressions. And so that first greeting, generally speaking in an interview, often best if, as the interviewee, you're the first to speak. And when you do speak, you want to be smiling and saying something positive. My favorite suggestion for students is to start with a thank you and end with a thank you, if that makes sense. So starting with thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm so excited to be here today is a great way to get started in an interview. And then finishing off with thank you so much for your time. I really appreciated our conversation. Something along those lines is great. As far as appearance, we'll talk a little bit more about the technical aspects of webcam and that kind of thing, but you are going to want to make sure that you are dressed for the occasion. And I would say even wearing dress pants and nice socks or whatever it is that makes you feel good about yourself. And then doing things so that you feel the most confident and the most professional is really going to be important here as well. And then for body language, sitting up straight. And then if you could imagine, employers are going to try to find ways to check in to see if you're confident and if you're friendly. Those are two things employers are often looking for. And the easiest way to do that is to smile. Smiling is one of the best body language tips I can give for interviews, and especially because it's harder in a webcam interview. That's why I kind of really push on the body language. Also, you're going to want to look at the camera rather than at yourself. For some of us, it's really hard. One tip I even have is if you move that little square where you can see yourself to be directly underneath the camera, so that even if you catch yourself looking to see, you know, how you're looking or whatever, if it's directly under your camera so that it seems a little bit more like you're looking directly into the eyes of the employer, that's going to be good for you. So whatever it is that your eyes are naturally drawn to, bringing that closest to the camera is a great idea. All right, and now we want to hear from you. So what are your ideas for making a good first impression in an interview? I've given you some of them, certainly not all of them. Do you have any tips or tricks that you'd like to share with us? If you'd like to go to www.menti.com, you can use that code, the same code as before, 781987, and let us know. Smiling, yes, that's the big one, isn't it? I find sometimes even my face is sore after a long webcam call because I'm trying to make sure that I smile the whole time. Anything else? Any other tips that you can think of? Speaking positively. Okay, I'm really glad that somebody said that. Being positive in a pandemic is actually a little bit harder than it might sound, right? So it is possible that the employer might say, you know, how are you doing during all of these changes? And maybe you failed a class, or you're really worried about a loved one, or something kind of bad is happening. We're going to want to keep the positive things the clearest in those interviews. So trying to find the bright spots, the funny moments, the nice walk you had or whatever, because ultimately, if there's a negative energy that comes through in the interview, that negativity can kind of stick to you. But if you are being positive in what you're saying, that positivity can stay there. If there's more than one interviewer, greet individually. Yes, that's brilliant. Really good advice. Staying focused, minimizing distractions. That's right. And it's hard in a work from home environment. And you might even let the employer know, I live with a couple roommates and a dog. They know I'm having an interview right now. But I hope that if a dog is barking, you can understand, or something that can clarify that. Cleaning the background is really important. It's nice if you can have a wall directly behind you. Ask the question after our discussion, is there anything that makes me an unideal candidate? Oh, that's an interesting point. I want to spend a minute there for a moment. I know that Forbes or somebody important once launched that as a really great tip. And what I would actually caution you to do is at the very end of the interview, I don't want you to encourage the employer to brainstorm negative things about you. Not in the interview. What you could do differently is get them to brainstorm positive things about what you could do. So if after 6 months of me being on your team, if I was doing an exceptional job, what would I have to accomplish in order for you to feel like I've done an exceptional job? Get them to brainstorm positive things about your impact rather than them highlighting what makes you a negative contact. Because the last thing we want to have the employer feel is maybe actually you're not the best candidate. In the same way that when they ask you about your weaknesses, you're going to talk about something that you used to be bad at that you've now improved, rather than talking about the biggest stumbling block for the employer. I'm really glad that you brought that up. And if you still feel like that's a question you want to ask the employer, it's your interview, you absolutely can, but I just encourage you to try to keep that conversation as positive as possible. Yeah.
And I definitely agree with you, Alicia. Sometimes the interview is all about how you made people feel, right? You've probably heard that phrase that people will forget what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. I believe that's a Maya Angelou quote. And if you are bringing in negativity to the interview, or you're asking them to highlight negative things about you, they will remember that more than if you stick to the positives.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So let's move right along then. I did say that we were going to get into some of the technical aspects. So testing the technology beforehand is actually going to be really helpful. So you want to, again, set up that call with a family member or friend using the same webcam technology the employer is going to be using. Be early, set up your computer, close your extra tabs, turn off notifications, all of those kinds of things. And just case in point, when we were about to start this webinar, I realized, oh, my computer is having a hard time. I'm going to restart my computer before this call. But because I was early, we had enough time to run that restart. So plan to actually, you know how they say be early to your interview. Be early, be 15 minutes early to your webcam call as well. And then starting with that strong introduction is really helpful. Saying hello and smiling into the camera, thanking them, and then being prepared for small talk. But like we said, being positive. Find a common interest. And we're not going to talk about how do we feel like Rob Ford's recent announcement went, or anything about government policies surrounding the coronavirus, or anything that could even if in your social circles everybody agrees about a certain topic, you don't know that that's necessarily for the employer. And so we want to stay away from anything that could be potentially controversial as well. And then for others of you, if we go to our next slide, you'll have questions about appearance. And there's a few different things that you can do. Again, you'll be getting this PowerPoint, so you'll be able to actually watch this full video. But there are a few small things that you can change. Having light in front of you rather than behind you can really make a difference. Also, and I know that some of you may have already had calls with family members or friends who are holding their phones down in their laps, and you just get a great view of their nostrils while you're having a web call. Looking down on your screen isn't always the most flattering either. So I know that when I'm working at my dining room table, I have a whole stack of books that I'm propping my laptop on top of so that I'm eye level with the camera. And this makes a big difference. And again, you'll see dressing up and being aware of what's in the background can really help create a professional image for you.
And going along with the dressing up as well, I we've all seen the bloopers where people think that they can't see their bottom halves, and you know, there's people in shorts and things like that, or worse. So aside from dressing professionally makes you feel professional while you're speaking, it also just covers your bases just in case.
That's
So
right.
I highly recommend it. Yes.
Yeah, that's right. Because you might think I can wear track pants because they can't see me. I tested it, but then a coworker or, you know, a dog walks into your room and you have to deal with them, and suddenly you're standing up and you're in your track pants. So
Correct.
these are things we wanna be prepared for. You're gonna wanna find a quiet space with some insulation. And by insulation, even if you go to a carpeted room or a room with curtains, that kind of thing can really be helpful. Spare bedrooms can be notorious for not having a lot in them, and so they can get echoey, for example. So just being mindful of that. We also recognize, though, that you're in an environment that might not be perfectly set up for an interview, and so you might not be able to have everything. In my case, I have a great carpeted space, but no natural light. So you may have to just play around with what's possible here. Having something clean in the background is great. Keeping that camera angle complementary to you. Natural light, or at least be front lit rather than backlit, so the light's in front of you, not behind you. And then dress appropriately from head to toe, as we have iterated before. Okay, and then when we talk about body language, we want positive body language. And so that will mean sitting up straight. Make sure that ergonomically you're able to do so and keep your eye line at the webcam level at the same time. But sitting up straight suggests confidence, which is really important here. Smiling, and then with your voice, what can often happen, and I'm a bit of a theater nerd, I studied theater in university, and what can sometimes happen is we start nice and strong, and then the rest of the sentence slowly just fades away. And so we'll talk really loudly, and then all of a sudden we can't hear the last few words. And so if you notice, we're going to want to spend a little bit of additional energy making sure that we have consistent volume through the entire sentence. And if you even listen to people on the news or radio, you notice they have a few tricks to make sure that those last few words in a sentence doesn't fall off in volume and tone. So those are kinds of things that you can think about or work on or practice as well. But of course, you don't need to become radio announcers overnight. That's not what I'm suggesting. But just remembering volume and pace. For some, it's very easy when you're nervous to want to speak quickly. And my quick note about how to slow down is, while you're booting up your computer or anything like that, you're going to want to take long, slow, deep breaths. And that's going to become really helpful for you so that your heart can slow down, your breathing can increase, and that actually sends a message to your brain saying, we aren't in a fight or flight situation anymore, we can relax. The other thing I'll note is the employer wants to hear your answers, and they want you talking for like a full minute and a half. And so you are allowed to take your time in your answer. You're not bothering somebody by answering one of the interview questions. So do keep that in mind as well as you are interviewing, that it's okay that you're talking, and give yourself permission to do so.
And to take up space. They're there for you, right?
Yeah, and they want to hear what you have to say. And then finally, AI, artificial intelligence, is moving into the interview space, as you can imagine. So we won't go into artificial intelligence interviews specifically in depth today, but we will give you a few resources to help you kind of get started. So some of you may be asked to do an interview where you are asked to record your answers and send them on. And it's possible that when you're doing that, they have AI watch the videos before a human being. watches those videos. And so there are really great resources from Duke University, from the University of Maryland and the University of Colorado, who have sample questions, and then how to HireVue, which is a AI interview platform, has also provided tips for you to do well in that next interview. So those are things that you can look into as well if that's something that you're curious about. Also, if you get invited to do a HireVue or AI interview, you could attend a drop-in or a mock interview to speak with a career advisor for more information about that. But yeah, so now I feel like we've got ourselves thinking about how to prepare. So what happens when they're actually asking you interview questions? Paulina, you want to take us away?
Absolutely. All right. So answering interview questions, basically it's all about proving your skills. Do you have what they are looking for? So one of the most common questions that we get a lot of questions about, and a question interviewers like to ask, is tell me about yourself. Employers like to ask this question, and as an interviewee, it can be easy to feel like quite unfocused with this question, like you're not quite sure where to go. So if you get asked, tell me about yourself, it's unfortunately not the place to go and tell them about how you were born on a rainy Thursday in Mexico City, and you know, your grandma wanted to name you this. That's really not the place to go, although I would love to tell you my story because that's how mine starts. But really tell me about yourself is where employers want you to focus on 3 to 5 things that are most relevant to the job or field about you. We say 3 to 5 highlights because it's not necessarily 3 to 5 skills or 3 to 5 experiences. It really could be anything. So you want to draw from all of the sources that you have experienced in your life, such as paid or unpaid work, academics or extracurricular activities, or just reasons why you would be a great fit for the job. So you might want to consider answering, how did you get interested in this industry? Or what are your relevant skills, knowledge, and experience? What have you done to develop these skills and knowledge? Where are you now? What are you excited about for the future within this field or within this company? You want to make sure that you're connecting your highlights to the job by telling them why your background is a great fit for the company. Companies basically want you to draw that link between your background and this job and this company and why you're a good fit. They're asking about this question because they want you to make that link for them. So I've met a lot of students who are very tempted to go into their work history and tell me about yourself. But that's not necessarily the only thing you want to draw on, because they can read that in your resume, right? So make sure that you are, if you're talking about your work history, talk about the different things that you learned that made you a good fit for this job. So really make sure that you're making that link between yourself and the job. So if we think about it, if we want to think about it in terms of a Venn diagram, we have on our bottom left here, what are your skills, your interests, what do you like to do, what are your values, what do you care about? So it's all about you. On the bottom right is what is the background and experience that are that evidence that serves those skills or interests or values. And top right, what is relevant to your employer? What is their bottom line? What do they care about? How do you fit into that? And then that middle juicy spot is what are the connections between you and the employer or contact, profession, job posting, whatever it might be. So it's all about making those linkages. So this answer, when you are answering it, you want to make sure that you're taking between 90 to 120 seconds here. So you can take a little bit longer than most other interview questions. And you want to make sure that you are letting them know why you're the right fit. It is a little bit harder to have a template for this answer because it is a very individual kind of answer. If you've known the company since you were 3 and you've always wanted to work for them, maybe that's something that you would want to mention, but maybe you wouldn't mention that for a company you've never heard of. So really take the time to craft an answer to this question. It helps you prepare for the interview. And you also always want to be ready for this question. I met someone once who told me that she spent 2 days preparing for an interview. She was so thrilled about this interview. And then she gets to the interview and they ask her, tell me about yourself. And she realized that that was the one question she didn't prepare for. And it kind of went downhill from there because she just didn't feel prepared. So I would really hate for that to happen to you. Please prepare for this question. All right, so aside from tell me about yourself, there's other things that employers will want to see in an interview question. So what they're looking for are transferable skills and technical skills. So let's spend a little bit of a moment here. Employers are certainly looking for both of these type of skills, technical skills being those that you're maybe learning in your programs or that you've been learning about separately. So examples might be advanced Excel functions or programming or working in a lab. All of those are technical skills. And transferable skills are those skills that you learn everywhere and you apply everywhere. Things like communication skills or teamwork. Those kinds of skills. So it is kind of tempting to think that employers are only looking for technical skills, but that's only really about half the puzzle here. What happens is that employers are, yes, looking for a baseline technical skill. So say they're hiring somebody to work in a lab. They will certainly want somebody to have, say, a certain knowledge of science principles. And maybe they want somebody to have some lab experience. So there is some baseline technical skills that they're looking for, but say they get 10 applicants that have those baseline skills. What will put one applicant over the top over another one will always be transferable skills. So all of these 10 applicants can work in the lab, but 1 or 2 applicants are showing me that they have communication skills and they have the teamwork skills that I'm looking for. Me as a recruiter, I will 100% of the time go to the person who can prove that they have the most transferable skills. And one question we get a lot as career advisors is, how do I prove that I have good communication skills? Anybody can say that they have communication skills, but how do we prove these transferable skills? And that is a great question, and we will talk about those in a second. There are different types of questions, and we will be able to prove things in different ways. So you may have seen these in different places where you have interviewed. And actually what we're going to do is that I am going to, let's see if I can do this. Yes, okay, so you should have an annotate feature at the top of your screen. If you have an annotate feature, can you put a check mark or just kind of circle the types of questions you've been asked in an interview? I'm curious if you've seen any of these types of interviews. Yes, okay, I'm starting to see a little bit of feedback. Wonderful. So as you're letting me know what kind of questions you've gotten in interviews, we'll work through these quickly. So problem-solving questions, things like how many yellow cars are in Canada. The interviewer does not have the answer. They're not looking for a specific number. What they're looking for is, how do you work through problems? So you just want to kind of walk them through how you would look for this answer. Other employers like to ask situation or hypothetical questions. So what would you do if you were almost finished a project and you realized that you made a mistake that required you to start over? So these questions are quite common, and you just kind of want to walk them through the situation that most describes your transferable skills, that shows them that maybe you would be able to communicate or work with your team to get through it. Technical skills, certainly, technical questions, depending on your job, these might be quite common, and we won't get into those in this workshop. The skill testing question also very similarly, they just want to know that you know your stuff. But then there's behavioral based questions, and they can be sort of similar to situational. That's where we're going to spend most of our time. And we'll get to what these look like in a second. I just wanted to acknowledge all of your participation on the screen. Thank you very much. I see that many of you have had the situational or hypothetical. And I'm sure once we get to the behavioral based, this one will look very common. And just so you're aware, the reason why these are so common is because employers have the theory that how you behaved in the past will automatically kind of show them how you will behave in the future. So, okay, the annotations have cleared. Thank you very much again for sharing those with me. And we'll continue here. I need to get, okay, there we go. So behavioral type of questions are the ones that will begin with, tell me about a time when you set a goal for yourself, or give me an example of a time you faced a conflict, or describe a situation in which you were under a lot of pressure. So these questions, now that you see them, you've probably seen them before. They are so, so common because what you've done in the past will predict your future behaviors. Employers want you to go into story mode and tell them how you dealt with it. So anytime you're answering a behavioral-based question, you want to pick a specific moment in time and tell us a little story about them. So it's not, the answer won't be as effective if I ask you, tell me about a time you worked under pressure, and you tell me, well, I've worked at McDonald's for 2 years, so I worked under pressure every day. Will not be as effective as if you were actually to go into an example of a specifically busy day that you had at McDonald's and you walk me through how that day went. And the best way to be effective is actually to answer your questions in a STAR approach. So I'm asking you to tell me a story, and I want you to format it by telling me about the situation first, then going into the task about what you needed to do, then the action and the result. So I will give you an example of what this is, what this looks like, and I will actually use a McDonald's example. That's why you brought it up. But in general, you want to give me a little bit of background and context. Don't spend too much time on this, but just enough of the 5 W's to get me to know where you are at. Then you tell me the task, what you needed to do. Then the action is where you're going to spend the most amount of time in your answer. And the more action verbs you can use here, the better. And then the result isn't the longest part of your answer, but it is very, very important to your answer. So let me give you an example of a behavioral answer here. So if I were to ask you, give me an example of a time you took initiative. This is what a response might look like. So we just broke them down into bullet points. Certainly once you deliver this verbally, you deliver it within 80 to 100 seconds. And what we like about the STAR response is that it keeps your answer focused. So one of the questions we had at the beginning of this presentation is, how do I keep my answers focused? And the STAR response helps you with that. Once you go from the situation to the task to the action and then the result, you've given enough information that I, as an interviewer, am starting to understand the skills that you might have, but without having to go into too much extraneous detail. The behavioral answers and questions are the way to prove your transferable skills. So if somebody were to give you an answer like this about McDonald's and what they did that day that was really busy, hopefully you would see that this person actually took the initiative, and if they deliver this with confidence, you will likely be convinced that this person has initiative. So any questions, and I'm just going to pull up the chat here. Any questions about the STAR approach before we continue? All right, so what we're going to do now is that we're going to actually have you getting started with a STAR response. So we're going to ask you to choose a behavior-based question that you expect an employer to ask in an interview, and then we're going to ask you to create a written STAR response. So we do have a worksheet, and Alicia, I'm wondering if you can help with providing the link to the worksheet if you've been with us for the last couple of days. Sorry?
I absolutely can. Yeah, I'll pull.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. So if you've been with us the last couple of days, it's the same link, but you want to use that template to create a STAR response to one of these questions. You choose whichever one. We want to give you a few minutes to answer that behavior-based question. I'll give you 5 minutes just to get started on your situation, then your task, then your action, and then your result. You don't have to be, you don't have to have perfect grammar or spelling or anything like that. Just jot down general bullet points for each of those. Thank you, Alicia, for that link. And then we will actually get a little bit of a chance to practice that. So I'm gonna give you about 4 minutes here and then check in with you. And if you have any questions, feel free to message them through the chat. All right, so just about 2 more minutes here. Again, just broad strokes, the STAR response. We just want to get you started on one of these. And I want to encourage you, if you have never worked with a conflict question, so tell me about a conflict you've had in the past and how you dealt with it. I encourage you to work with it right now. It is a great question that employers love to ask. And you want to make sure you have a response. Saying, I haven't really had a conflict in the past doesn't really cut it. You want to make sure you have an example of a conflict. Okay, 30 more seconds to wrap up here. Alrighty, fantastic. So I hope that you got to get started on your star response. It's really valuable to have them written down and organized in this format. So then when you go to actually verbalize them in an interview setting, you can, and you'll feel a lot more comfortable doing it. So again, you'll be sent the slides so that you have both the McDonald's example and also this format that we always recommend. The STAR approach is one of our favorite tools because it works. And I encourage you to practice this with your friends and family. Even if you're just talking about your weekend, or maybe you want to let them know how you did a week ago, some event that happened to you. If you start to organize your answers in situation, task, action, result, you will actually get more focused with your storytelling, and you'll also be able to be more effective. They will want to hear what you want to say. And if you notice, great storytellers usually follow this format. If you've ever met somebody that starts out by telling you, well, last weekend I did this, oh, but I forgot to tell you that today I did that. So that when I asked about it the day before, they did this, oh, but wait, that happened? That's not what you want to do in an interview. And the STAR approach helps you minimize that.
Oh, just a note. For some of you, you asked the question, how do I keep my interview answer? Following this STAR approach will allow you to do that. So yeah, this is the big tip we give you if you want to make sure that you're following something that makes sure that you don't ramble. It keeps you focused.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. And I will skip this one for now, and just for the sake of time. Alicia, what do we do when we get towards the end of an interview?
Absolutely. So I love talking about this. In fact, we just had a conversation with somebody who a few days ago received an offer of employment at a fantastic organization. We're so excited for her. And when we asked her, okay, so you did a virtual interview, what tips do you have? How did you stand out? The person indicated that what ultimately worked best for her was she did a lot of research and she asked really great questions at the end of the interview. And in the end, the interviewers actually told her that that was one of the reasons why she stood out from the other applicants. And so this isn't just some bonus. When I did some hiring before, I was hiring a number of students, and I told them as one of the requirements, I'm going to interview everyone who applies because interviewing is great practice. My main tip is to have a good question to ask me. And it was actually surprising how many people, even with that blatant explanation, at the end of the interview, when I said, do you have any questions for me? They said, no, I don't.
Oh my.
So what it shows is how curious you are. If you have questions, it doesn't necessarily show that you don't know something. It shows that you want to know more, and that's what we want to see. So questions you could ask could include, what do you expect a co-op student to have accomplished in the first month? This is a play on the suggestion I gave at the beginning of this webinar, when you want them to start brainstorming or picturing you doing something really well. What aspects of the role do you believe to be the most rewarding or the most challenging? This is helpful, especially if you want to know what some of the best or the worst parts of the job might be, and asking it in a really nice way. What are the key priorities for someone in this role? This is a very helpful question, because if they say it's time management and it's attention to detail, it's easy for then you to say, to give an example of the time that you showed really strong attention to detail, or say, actually, I would say that those are some of the strengths I bring to this position. So what I'm hearing is this could be a good fit. Can you give me an example of the types of projects the previous co-op student was involved in? Or what types of training will there be for the successful candidate? If Or in what ways can I prepare for this job if I'm the successful candidate? In co-op, it's very possible that you have a little bit of time, a couple of days or even a week before the job begins. And so if there's a technical skill or a virtual online component that you can practice ahead of time, or a knowledge-based area you can focus on, that would be great. My other thought for you is, if this is an employer you really, really are excited about, you can also nerd out with them. It's very possible that you're sitting across from somebody who used a code that you want to learn more about, or they're solving a problem that you're really passionate about. And so feel free to ask the questions that you actually are quite curious about with the company. The one caveat that I would include here is keeping the conversation positive. In the same way that we talked about positivity at the beginning of the series, we want to make sure that the questions aren't things like, how badly has the coronavirus affected your employees, for example? Or I actually saw an article about how there has been some layoffs in your company. Tell me about that. We aren't going to ever focus on negative news or negative statements, or ask a question that would get the employer thinking about something that they don't like. And that's because we want positive energy in that interview space. One question that has come up before and used to be encouraged more often is, can you tell me a little bit more about what your company culture is like? Some employers are really quick to answer this question and understand this question quite well, and others are a little bit thrown off by it. It's the same thing as if I were to ask you, can you tell me about what the culture was in your science lab last term? Because you're just used to it, it's like the air you breathe. Sometimes it's hard to put your finger on what actually that experience was like. So ways that you can get at that question would be things like, what do you like about working in your company? What's some of the highlights? Or again, that second question on the bullet pointed list, what are some of the most rewarding or the most challenging experiences? That can help get to some of the company culture questions you're asking without stumping the employer. You want the employer to also feel smart at the end of this interaction as well.
And if I can interject here for a second as well, speaking of questions that might get at things like company culture, or if you're curious about what has been happening with the company lately, but you don't want to make it negative, one of the tips that this person that Alicia and I were talking to gave us was that it is a little bit weird to not acknowledge that everything has shifted for everybody in the last few months. So it's okay to ask questions like, in what ways has your role shifted or the department shifted? So it's not about what are the awful things that have happened, but more in which ways has the job changed? And that is a positive way to frame that question.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, sorry, I missed one.
Oh, if you are applying to jobs through the Waterloo Works Co-op job board, you may ask about salary. When you're asking about salary though, again, outside of co-op at Waterloo, for co-op employers, generally speaking, salary is not discussed until the job is offered. So we really caution you not to talk about salary unless you found the job posting through Waterloo Works Co-op job board. And you might want to go back and double check that. And then if you do ask about salary, first you want to make sure that it wasn't already mentioned in the job description. And then you're going to leave that to be your final question that you ask. You want to have questions about the company first, then about your job or experience specifically, and then finally for salary. And one tip that I give students is you can kind of make it my fault. You can say something like, a career advisor that I spoke to recently encouraged me to ask about salary. Or I'm putting together a budget for the spring term, and I was just wondering what salary expectations there might be. And if you put the blame on me, then if they say, oh, we don't normally talk about that, then it's my fault, not yours. So by all means, use me as your scapegoat for that one. But again, most of the time salary is discussed quite openly for co-op positions, and I encourage you to go about that as one of your final questions of the interview.
And Alicia, just to reiterate, how many questions should we be asking at the end of an interview?
I would say 3, 2 or 3 maybe.
Yes, I wouldn't go past that for sure. Yeah. We just have a lot on there, so don't feel pressure to ask all of these by any means.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good point. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so now we want to hear from you. Again, a Menti post. We covered a lot of things. We talked about how to research the company, or that you should at least. We talked about highlighting your key skills, the STAR response, practicing out loud, and now we want to see how you might put that into action. What are you most likely going to do as a result of attending this workshop? And I see we have 2 people who have connected already. The first in the lead is coming up with 4 to 5 STAR answers. That's right, to really focus on what options are available. There is no right or wrong, by the way. What things you feel you need to work on or want to practice is going to be up to you. But it's great for you to give yourself even a deadline for when you actually want to put this practice in motion. So if it means setting up a webcam call with somebody so that they can pretend to interview you, when do you want to do that by? When do you want to be prepared for this next step? And so, yeah, I'm seeing a lot. The 4 to 5 STAR answers, especially for the pride stories or the moments you really want the employers to know about. Then we see highlighting those key skills the employer's looking for in the job description. Practicing out loud. Oh man, I know that there are some times when I think I'm about to say something really brilliant, and then as it's coming out of my mouth, it doesn't sound great. And the more we practice, the more we can connect that mind to mouth connection, the more likely we'll be able to speak clearly and confidently without fumbling over our words. Yeah.
And I think a key portion of practicing, aside from strengthening that mind-to-mouth connection, I really appreciate that phrase, Alicia. Aside from strengthening that is also practicing in front of your webcam and watching yourself, you know, in terms of your background and your lighting and your posture. Are you using your hands too much? All of these different things will also be a great way to practice and feel more confident.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Great. Okay, and so some of you might be feeling excited about this or realize that you want to do more practice, and so we do have resources for you. We have the mock interview appointment, as I talked about, one of my favorite appointment types. If you haven't booked an appointment through Waterloo Works yet, it's a fairly painless process. So just going on to Waterloo Works and you'll see on the left-hand column appointments where you can book yourself in. We also have resume, networking, LinkedIn, and work search strategy workshops throughout the term. If you missed one of the workshops in this series, so if you want to know more about personal branding or resumes or work search and networking, we do have those all coming up again next week. But we have the LinkedIn workshop, for example, happening next Wednesday, and some other really great work search strategy and resume workshops coming up. And then, yeah, check in with this webinar if there's anything that you feel that you missed, for sure. And then finally, we want to address some accessibility resources that are available to you. Working remote tips. From an accessibility standpoint, there's a lot of things that go into making the experience of working from home accessible. So we do have that link. And again, this PowerPoint will be sent to you. So this link will be a little bit easier. But even if you Google it, you should be able to find accessibility resources Waterloo. And just know that there are resources available for you as a student who could be working remotely. Also, feel free to connect with your student advisor or a career advisor if you have any questions or concerns about working some of the things that you have questions or concerns about. And then you can connect with accessibility services with disclosure conversations. There is a really great resource on our Career Hub when you're looking in the Find Work section about when to disclose if you have a disability. Career Advisor would love to talk to you more about that, but accessibility services, they're the experts in that way. They also have access to the assistive technology that can make that transition easier, and the peer mentorship transition. So you could talk to a peer who has maybe done this before and hear and learn from them. Accessibility services has appointments that you can access and a phone line as well. So again, if this is something that is interesting to you, we really encourage you just to ask your questions and get a really great expert response. All right. And then as always, we love to check in with you. We want to make this web series as helpful to you as possible, and we want to know if it worked for you. So you will be receiving a survey very shortly, probably by the end of this week, just asking what it is that you liked about it or what we could improve, or if it helped you in your work search journey. And so we do encourage you and invite you to respond to that survey when it hits your inbox. All right, and now one of my favorite times of these web series, it's time to ask questions. So what did that flag for you? What was unclear? What do you think maybe the rest of your peers in this web series could benefit from learning more about? Is there something that we can share with you? Feel free to ask your question in the chat function and we can address any questions you may have.
And you can also unmute yourself if you'd like to ask verbally as well.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have questions and you're about to sign off, we just want to thank you for being with us during this webinar. We hope it was helpful, and as always, it brings a lot of joy to Alicia and I to give this information to you. So we hope you enjoyed it. We always have a blast being able to share with you. So thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lauren. That's encouraging to hear. Thanks for joining us for so many of these.
Yes, really appreciate it, Lauren. Have a great rest of your week.
Oh, I'm glad to hear you're more motivated, Vera. That's awesome.
Yes, that is so nice. Thank you, Vera.
And yes, I'll send you that link to the appointments.
Thank you, Alicia, for doing that. And thank you, Maria, for your comments there. Really, really appreciate it. And while Alicia is looking for that link, you can also go to the Center for Career Action website, and the Aura Waterloo Works, the appointments link is on the left-hand side. I did get a question here. When booking a mock interview, do we need to prepare a job description or something of the sort? Thank you very much for that question. So the mock interview is completely driven by you and what you need at that moment. So you might come to Alicia or I and say, hey, I just want to talk about how to prepare for an interview. So that you don't need to bring a job description. We can just talk about interviews and any questions you might have. If you want to bring in a specific job description that you want to prepare for, or you have an upcoming interview that is specific that you would like to prepare for, you can send us that job description ahead of time or during your interview, and we're happy to help you tailor your answers to that job description. So it is absolutely your choice if you would like to prepare a job description, but you do not need to do that work ahead of time. If you just want to talk about interviews, we're happy to do that with you. And Alicia has sent the link to the Center for Career Action and one-on-one supports. Thank you, Alicia.
Absolutely. I also see a question here from Benjamin. Is it okay to substitute your email with a personal website on a resume? Great question, Benjamin. I would actually recommend putting both. If an employer wants to communicate with you via email, that might be because they want to send you the link to access the webcam call, for example. It might be frustrating for the employer if they have to navigate a personal website and find a way to contact you through the personal website. I do encourage students to have a personal website on a resume if they have one, to include that URL. But I would also recommend using your Waterloo email address when possible as well on your resume. Anything to add there, Paulina?
Yes, I definitely agree with you. You want to add in an email. Even if you have that email within your website, you want to make your contact information as easy as possible for the recruiter. If there's something that I learned when I used to be in that role, is that I need information to be as accessible as possible when I'm recruiting. So if I have to look too hard for something, I could easily move on to the next participant or the next applicant. So it's very important to have your email in a accessible place in your resume, very quick to see, and also your phone number. If you are a local candidate, make sure that you have your phone number in an easy to find place on your resume. Because recruiters, even if you don't use your phone a lot perhaps, recruiters certainly are still using the phone to connect with people. Thank you for that question.
Amazing, great. I see another question here. Would you suggest preparing for other questions beside tell me about yourself? If so, would you write questions and orally practice them? Yes, I would absolutely prepare for other questions. Generally speaking, what I recommend for students is look through the job description. You'll see under the required skills section a whole bunch of things like time management or Python or whatever it is. Then try to imagine a question that they could ask related to that skill and write out or at least say out loud what your answer would be if they were asking a question about your skill level in that area. And so generally speaking, anytime you're preparing for an interview, practicing out loud is going to be a key component of that. So imagining what questions the employer could ask and then saying those saying those answers out loud can be really helpful. Great question. Would you like us to brainstorm what kinds of questions those might be, or did that answer your question? Okay, awesome.
Great resource again for questions is Career Hub. There's a whole interviewing section and we highly encourage you to check that out.
Oh, perfect. I'm glad I answered your question. That's great.
Oh, and thanks for the link to Career Hub there, Alicia.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's one of the most robust resources that we have if you're looking to do some reading and you can't come in for a drop-in or appointment. It's something I really recommend.
I agree. And so, you know, Alicia and I would be are part of the team of career advisors who you would be seeing during those appointments. So don't be afraid to book them. If you don't feel like you've prepared a lot or anything like that, feel free to just book that appointment anyway. We're here to meet you where you're at, and hopefully this comes along. All of us are super passionate about what we do, and we all are friendly people. I really appreciate these people inside and outside of a work setting. And hopefully you'll find the same as well, that if you're a little nervous about interviewing, that we can help you kind of feel a little bit more at ease and give you a safe place to practice so that you are feeling a lot more confident the next time you go to interview.
Oh, precisely. Sometimes I get mock interview appointments where we actually don't practice the interview. We just chat and answer questions. I had a student just book another mock interview because she had a second interview after our first one. And so just had questions. What is a second interview for? What will they ask me? How is it different? And we never actually practiced. We just chatted about it. And so we can absolutely tailor the appointment to be whatever it is that you want to know or what you want to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I remember back when we were in the Tatum Center, sometimes all I would do would be to walk around the Tatum Center with students to show them the different interview rooms and things like that so they get a feel for where they would be going. So by all means, the appointment would be led by you. Okay, so I'm not seeing any more questions on our group chat, and I don't have any in my private chat. Alicia, do you have any?
No, I'm free and clear over here.
Okay, all right. So then if there are no more questions, we will get going. We want to thank you again for hanging in there with us. In Spanish, we have a saying that if you're saying goodbye a lot, it means that you don't want to leave. And that's how I'm feeling right now. We still have quite a bit of participants with us, and I imagine that you just want to hear the answers to questions. But I really appreciate you hanging in there with us. And if you have any other questions, we're always here for you. Tons of resources, just go to the Center for Career Action website. But thank you so much for joining us today. Alicia, any last words?
Good luck out there. Yeah, keep in touch whenever you can. We're here to support you.
That's right. And whether you are looking for a co-op job, or maybe you've decided that you're looking for a part-time job or something else, whatever it might be, we are here for you. So don't hesitate to reach out. This is what we love to do. So the more students we get to see, the better. Thank you again, and we hope you have a great week, and we'll see you later. Take care. Thank you for joining us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.